Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, an unsettling work of weird horror, The Witnesses Are Gone by Joel Lane. This book has lingered with me in the days since I finished it in a way that not that many books do. So it's The Witnesses Are Gone by Joel Lane, and it's a very unsettling work of horror. It's only a novella, it's only about 60-70 pages long, but it packs a huge amount into those pages. And as I say, it's a book that has left images in my brain that are haunting me slightly. It really, really is a very effective book. Joel Lane was a British horror writer. Sadly, he died in 2013 at the young age of 50. He's an author I hadn't heard of until recently when the publisher sent me a few of his books. So that one, The Witnesses Are Gone, and also Scar City and The Earthwire, which are short story collections. And I've had a number of people say that his short stories are particularly good. So he was a prolific short story writer, published a number of collections of horror short stories, and also wrote 2 novels. The Witnesses Are Gone is the first thing I've read by him. I'm very, very confident that it won't be the last. It really was great. I enjoyed it enormously in a way that being unsettled can be really, really enjoyable. It's something that I find myself drawn to again and again. So what's it about? So it's a book about a cursed movie, and I love books about cursed movies. It's one of my favourite tropes in both books and cinema. The one that I've read fairly recently, there's a couple I've read recently that I really liked actually. One was Experimental Film by Gemma Files, and the other one was Flicker by Theodore Rorschach. Both of that are much longer than the Joel Lane book. I think Flicker, is over 600 pages long. Experimental Film is about 300 pages. But I don't think either of them pack quite the punch that The Witnesses Are Gone does. So it's set in the UK in the early 2000s. It's about this guy, the narrator, who has moved house, and he's kind of sorting out stuff in his new house, and he finds this box which has got 4 VHS video cassettes in. 3 of them have just got like random rubbish on, but one of them has got this weird, unsettling film made by a French director called Jean Rien. And the narrator remembers hearing about this director before. He remembers other people having talked about him, and he remembers that he's got a magazine with an article about this director in it. When he finds the magazine, it's kind of crumbled to bits and he can't really make anything out from it. And that is a theme that continues throughout the book. The fact that recordings of this guy's work, recollections of this guy's work, reviews of this guy's work seem to just kind of disappear into the ether. He's someone that people have heard of, but no one can really remember having seen his films and things like that. There's a sense that it may all just be like an urban myth. But there's something that this guy, sees in this film that he watches, this short bit that he watches, that really unsettles and sticks with him, and he becomes obsessed with this director and becomes obsessed with finding out more about him. Now that is very, very similar to the plot of Flicker by Theodore Rorschach, but whereas Flicker dives headlong into the history of film and was a book that I loved because of that. The Witnesses Are Gone are much simpler, and it really just tells the story of this guy trying to find out more about this director. It's a really, really lean book, and yet it feels much bigger than it is. It feels like a really expansive book. Looking back on it, I can't believe that it was only 60-70 pages long. It feels like a novel rather than a novella. There is loads that happens in this book. There are loads of different places that the main character visits. You've got a load of different characters, and you really build up this sense of the whole world really through this book. So it's amazing to me that it's such a short book. The sense of time and place is really, really important to this book as well. So set largely in the UK, and it's a very kind of run-down, depressed version of the UK. It reminded me a little bit of the Factory books by Derek Raymond in that sense, although this is set kind of 20 years after the Factory books are set. But you get that same sense of kind of everyone being a little bit desperate. But he also travels to other places. So he travels to Scotland. He travels to, so the main part of the book is set in Birmingham. He travels to Scotland as well. And he travels to France in a really memorable sequence. There are lots of bits in this book that are almost kind of dreamlike. And it's got almost like a Lovecraftian vibe because of that. You get the sense that there are things that happen to the guy in this book, things he witnesses, that you're never really sure if they're real or not, if they're just his imagination. And that kind of horror I always find really, really unsettling. The time, so I've talked about place a little bit, but the sense of time is really interesting as well. So this is set, as I said, in the early 2000s, in the wake of 9/11, and that casts a shadow over the whole book, really. There's quite a lot of discussion of not the events of 9/11 really, but the war in the Middle East that followed thereafter. So you get that as a backdrop to this book, this sense that the world is kind of almost at war, that there's conflict everywhere, and that I think makes it even more powerful than it was already. But it's also an interesting time because this is at the start of the internet age, really, but before smartphones. So you do get some bits where he's kind of trying to research online and things like that, but everything is just much more difficult. Everything's slower. You get like weird email addresses and things like that. It feels like that, like the just the very beginning of the connected age that we live in now, but a time when the internet felt like quite a strange and dangerous place in some ways. So that that sense of time and place really plays into the effectiveness of the book. I really thought it was very, very well handled. The other kind of theme that Joel Lane discusses in this book, which I thought was great, was this sense that works of art, particularly like disturbing or unsettling works of art, become less unsettling, less disturbing, the more mainstream they become. So he talks about H.P. Lovecraft in this book, and the fact that when you first read H.P. Lovecraft, you feel like you are, and I've said this on the channel myself, this is my own reaction to Lovecraft as a young man, is you feel like you are reading true accounts of something that has happened rather than fiction. There's something really unsettling about Lovecraft that makes it feel like he has really seen these things he's writing about. But Lovecraft has become super mainstream, like more so than ever in the last kind of 10, 20 years. You can get like cuddly, plush Cthulhus and things like that now, can't you? And the more that happens, and the more, Lovecraft gets published in, like Library of America volumes and things like that and critically praised, I think that the more of that weirdness, that unsettlingness gets lost from his work. So the words don't change, but because he's become so mainstream, there is something less unsettling about his work. And I remember, back in the 80s, during the video nasty time in the UK, so like 80s and early 90s when I was in my teens, when a lot of horror movies were banned outright in the UK, and you could only get hold of them if you knew a guy who knew a guy who could get you a dodgy bootleg. And watching those films where like the quality had degraded because they'd been copied so many times and things like that, they were more unsettling than they would be if you watch them today in like a pristine Blu-ray version. There's something about that, the sense that you are watching something that is outside of the mainstream, that is a little bit edgy, that makes it more disturbing than it would have been otherwise. And Joel Lane, like 100% taps into that with his discussion of this director, Jean Ryan. So a really great short horror book. I enjoyed it enormously. I enjoyed being creeped out by it. I'm still feeling creeped out by it now. And I'm really, really looking forward to reading some more by Joel Lane. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Let me know if you've read Joel Lane and if you have a favourite book by him. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.